Hi there. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. A bit informal today, a little off the cuff. I've been wanting to do a vibe check the last couple of days because I've known what's happening astrologically and certainly how I've personally been feeling. And then the news of David Wilcock's passing hit my awareness yesterday morning, first thing, and I've already put out a small video to my membership only, like a 15-minute video of my raw impressions. So if you want to know that, you're going to have to be part of the membership in order to get that. But I wanted to do a vibe check anyway, and then this situation really just rounded all of that out because I could feel and know astrologically that there were aspects that could be a tipping point for people, especially right after this new moon that was in conjunction with Chiron. So I'm not exactly the most prepared. I didn't really plan on doing this, and I didn't prepare astrologically for a lot of things, so you're going to have to forgive a little bit of the rambliness of it. I am burning some Oregon cedar. This is a great bundle, not only for clearing, but also to dispelling and repelling pests of all kinds. It's a real, and it's, it just smells so earthy and cedary, right? So wonderful substance for cleansing and repelling a space. So, and then I'm going to burn some Palo Santo, I think, too, just to like bring in some upliftment as well. So really this check-in certainly is going to bring in the astrology that's current. We're going to talk about David Wilcock. I looked at his chart. I'm not going to share it. You're just going to have to take my word for it when I give you my impressions based on looking at his natal, progressed, and his draconic chart. We're not going to go into a full reading. It's too soon for that. And maybe one day I will do that. So, but it's really just to, it's like tying all these threads together because this event, the nature of his death and his passing is something I feel like we really do need to talk about in this community. When I say this community, this is, anybody who's watching this video for the most part is somebody that is intentionally on a spiritual pathway of development and using the different tools that will facilitate that. And astrology is one of those things, that temporal map. And also, too, there's an interest in alternative history. The UFO conversation is also part of that as well. Obviously, the starseed element and galactic astrology is all part of that. So anybody who's listening to this and watching this, for the most part, is going to be on that pathway. And I know talking about mental health for people who are engaged in all of those topics, which David Wilcock was, I think is really important. So I've already done my raw take for as soon as I found out, before I even looked at anybody else's social media. I did my raw take about what I think is happening, the nature of it and how things might progress moving forward. I put that out to my members already yesterday. So and there's things that I'm not going to share publicly about what I think truly is happening, but I'll probably allude to them in a general way. And so one thing I do want to say is that this topic is really very close to home for me. So in no way is this meant to be a means to gather views or clicks or whatever. And I didn't know him personally, so I'm not going to act as if I did. But I also know that the nature and how he died, like I said, I know it's so close, right? I have an immediate family member who passed away in the same manner just 2 years ago. And everything that surrounds it is there's just so much to it, right? So that, first and foremost, is like, it's very personal to me because of that connection. And I treat it with the respect and the reverence that it deserves. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing, and the reason that I want to talk about this publicly, bring in the conversation around mental health, look at the astrology, look at the potentials of astrology and how they can influence, where we make choices, how we make choices, what types of challenges or assets are happening at any particular time that are going to influence us potentially. This is all part of the conversation. And to just be very transparent is that ever since that full moon, and I know it's not just me, but I can only speak for my experience. And I do have clients that I see for energy work. I have a very robust bodywork clientele right now. I see 60 people a month, just separate people a month, just for massage alone. Maybe a little bit more when you start counting energy work and then the readings. So, I mean, I am seeing people and interacting with them energetically and otherwise, so I know that it isn't just me, but I am going to just speak to my experience because I think it's important that we realize that, even on this pathway, especially on this pathway of spiritual development, of walking a spiritual path with intention and consciousness, and what that really means, because we're all still going to suffer, right? We all have our demons that we interact with, our shadow. And I will say, since the full moon, the Libra full moon in particular, I have been really struggling. It was, the full moon, the Libra full moon was in my 8th house. That is the house where you meet your shadow, where you meet your demons, right? That you go to the bottom of your own abyss, and how you coming out of it is really a function of faith. Honestly. And sometimes we feel betrayal, and sometimes we develop real trust. That happens in the 8th house, and that is the true death of the ego. And one of the most difficult things and one of the most disappointing things, I think, to many people that walk this pathway is that stuff never really goes away. As long as you're a human being, you are going to ride the swells and the descents of the emotional ocean, right? You're going to ride them. You're going to feel them for all of the upliftment and joy and happiness you're going to feel. You're going to feel the depths of your own sorrow. And that's the dark night of the soul. And there's not just one. You go through them many times in your life. And the more you intend on your spiritual development with awareness and humility, the more intense it can really be. So I just want to impress upon you that I went through one of these swells very recently, and felt like I was dying inside, and it is very overwhelming, and it takes you over, right? And there are a few elements that are why I don't act on these feelings, because we all do have them at different times for different reasons. And people like David Wilcock, for instance, people like my family member, and other people that I know, other people that right? You get to a point and you make it or you break it. You break through or you just break. And I do believe, looking at his chart and all the elements and the current astrology, which I will go into just so we are very clear about what's going on, he broke, right? He broke, and instead of breaking through. And it's really tragic because, as far as I can tell, he was poised for a huge breakthrough. And that's exactly how it was in my family member's chart. She was poised for a very big breakthrough. If she had just held on, the baggage that was weighing her down and weighing her down and weighing her down, it was like, you get to the bottom and you choose, you're going to come back up or you're just going to give in. And I do feel like that David Wilcock obviously gave in. I do think that he did. He was responsible for his own passing. I think that anybody who's followed his work, and certainly the people who know him, right? Because after I gave my raw impressions and then went onto some social media, it mirrored and reflected back essentially what I was, what I had thought too, maybe not some of the reasons why, other than like his mental health had been really under a lot of strain for a long time, and you just reach a point. So something probably did happen, because in my experience, that people who do follow through with being responsible for, and I'm being very careful about being on YouTube here because I want this message to reach, and I know that you have to be mindful about the actual wording because then it gets suppressed. So, and we all know what we're talking about here if you're watching this. So what I've learned is that, the feelings that influence wanting to self-delete, basically, the circumstances of life, right? The things that happen, it builds up over time, disappointment after crushing disappointment, right? And a feeling of like you can't get out. But it's not often that it's planned for a long period of time. It's like it is planned, there is a sense of wanting to follow through, how you would do it, that kind of stuff. But the event itself is usually very spontaneous. And so my guess is something, and I'm going to, relay this astrologically too, without getting too much into the specifics of his chart, is that something probably did happen. Something did happen recently that was the last straw, right? There was the last straw, and there was, as far as he was concerned, there was no other way out, and it was now or never. Now, there are, like I said, many times, there are astrological aspects right now that certainly were likely an energetic influence into this. Now, do I think that maybe perhaps over time he was... or there were other kind of outside influences that had nudged him into position to do this? Yes, I do. But I think that's been going on for a very long time. Something that I'm not even comfortable saying out loud, what I think has really been happening. But I feel like that it wasn't just like a recent thing either. I think that he had been in position to take this fall now for a very long time. So, but I also feel like it's because there was an underlying foundation of instability there, and a Chiron wound that he ultimately did not feel like he could heal, right? That he could not let go of, that he could not heal. And that's how most people, in my experience, when they decide to end their life, that's where they're at. So that's my 2 cents about it. And like I said, it's very, very close to me, this subject. And interestingly enough, I just participated in like a community event over the weekend about preventing this this nature of one's passing. And so to have this be so high profile, yes, it's a niche community, but let's be real here. I mean, David Wilcock was a staple. I mean, I think he probably had producer credits once things got really rolling on Ancient Aliens on the History Channel. Like, it's not like he's unknown completely. But I think that the impact of this and the conversation about this is going to reverberate, and right on the heels of what is clearly going to be the disclosure summer, whatever that looks like. And I would really, it would really be the real tragedy too, along with the nature of his passing and how it got there. I would say another piece of this tragedy is his death being, just another piece to steer the narrative in a certain direction. And I think that it's important we talk about this so that that doesn't happen, because and I'm not sure how. I've had some conversations already with people about like how this could really go down and how it could unfold. And I just feel like you don't let a good tragedy go to waste, right? It's sick, but that is the truth when it comes to PR around anything that you're doing, right? So big middle finger to you guys. So let's talk about the astrology. What is it that really maybe led up to this point? Well, there's a couple things here. Now, we've already talked about the new moon conjunct Chiron, the wound, right? Especially in Aries, the wound of self, right? The confidence and a sense of agency and a sense of courage and boldness to be oneself, right? To just instinctually put yourself out there. So this new moon in Aries conjunct Chiron was right then and there, had already initiated a process of like, are we going to face the music about our wounding? Are we? Because that's really the question about this whole lunar cycle, right? And we've talked about that. And like I said, the full moon was really hard. I can't be the only one that it was really hard on, especially if you have Libra in the eighth house, right? Which is probably going to be what, like Aquarius and Pisces, right? I believe so. Uh, we'll look at some whole sign astrology just to get ourselves figured out. But I know it's in my eighth house and I'm an Aquarius rising. So, but it all depends on where those cusps really fall for you. So, facing the music, right? That you have to, you find yourself at the bottom here. So that already, I think, was difficult for many people, and some people more than others, right? And so you come out of it and you're like, okay, what are the things that get you through? Well, I mean, we all have our things. And for me, thankfully, I have a husband who is like an emotional Sherpa in these situations, because this is also just a feeling place that he's very, very familiar with and has pulled himself out of his own fire as well, many times over. So that is incredible to have that level of support and somebody that just sees you without trying to fix it, but also not like feeding it either or being afraid of it, right? And just being like, yeah, that is it right there. Like, that's what it feels like to be dying inside, right? And just to be crushed by the weight of it, or feeling like you're crushed by the weight of it. So that has been, but honestly, it's Jesus. What can I say, right? It is the truth, the life, and the way, right? And if you don't have that, whatever that is for you, it becomes really difficult, even in the most difficult situations, even when one feels the most trapped. But when you have Jesus truly in your heart, when you know him in your heart, right? Regardless of what your religion is or your spiritual practices, that part doesn't really even matter either. I mean, it kind of does, but when you accept him as the truth, the way, and the life, I mean, it all kind of comes down to that, huh? So I guess you call it esoteric or mystical, Christian mysticism, I guess you would call it at this point. So, or esoteric Christianity, doesn't matter. The point is that without those things, like that's where the crushing of the weight from the weight, really takes you over. So we had this new moon. So the thing that really, I'm going to, and I've never publicly really declared this before, and it's not a big deal. So, but I hope some of you that, kind of your demons get all bent out of shape when they hear the word in the name of Jesus, you're just going to have to deal with it. That's just all there is to it. I'm not asking you to accept it, but I'm also not looking for anybody's permission. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask here. So let's look at some astrology, shall we? Just to see what we are talking about here. So I'm going to change the layout here. There we go. All right. So this is from April 21st, and what you're going to see if you direct your attention down to the second house or Taurus, you see that Venus is at 26 to 27 Taurus. It is about to, as of today, actually this recording, which is the 23rd, it is going to meet Uranus. Okay, this is the last, remember I talked about this in the new moon forecast, if you watched it, right? That Venus and Uranus coming together at the very last degree of Taurus, which by the way is the Pleiades, is something that's not going to happen until Uranus makes a full revolution again, right? Because Uranus is coming out of Taurus, it's coming into Gemini in just a matter of days, and these two coming together is sure to trigger, and has, right? A huge upset in the order of things, right? Especially when you're talking about Venus in Taurus. This is her home territory, and she is very possessive of what is. And Uranus, of course, is that trigger point that just changes everything on a dime, right? It flips the script. So these two coming together is incredibly activating. But again, it's one of those make or break moments. And because that it's not going to happen again for a full revolution of Uranus, which is 84 years, right? Until Uranus comes back into Taurus again. This is like a curtain call, final, grand finale, right? The dress rehearsal. And the thing that really adds to it is that Venus coming into this conjunction passes over Algol, the demon star, the star in the head of the Gorgon, Medusa. And, I encourage you to go, look it up, do some research, ask AI. But I will tell you, because this is really just supposed to be a check-in and not like a full astrology report here. I will tell you that Algol, the demon star, right, the head of Medusa, right, what happened to Medusa? She was beheaded by Perseus. It is a star that is often connected to in fixed star astrology, which is ancient astrology before starseed astrology, basically, right? They still looked at fixed stars and constellations and still read for them. It just didn't have the starseed component, which I think is much more of a modern archetypal evolution, but that's something to talk about later. Anyway, Algol as the demon star often is connected to death and bereavement, but death by beheading. Sometimes accidents, but death by beheading. And just to give you context, when the first assassination attempt happened in July of 2024, which was the year of the dragon, by the way, when that happened, Uranus was in conjunction with Algol, and Mars in Leo was in a square to it. So, just to kind of give you this sense of like, that was another possible death by beheading, quote unquote, right? And the nature of David Wilcock's death, it definitely was meant to do that, right? To remove the head. And I've had to be very careful about how I word this. But again, it's not something that, you can go find out the nature of this yourself and then be like, oh, yeah, totally. So Venus crossing Algol and then coming into this conjunction with Uranus was happening in David Wilcock's seventh house, right? The house of relationship. So I think that and opposite Black Moon Lilith. He has Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio in his first house. He's a Scorpio rising, okay? So that right there suggests to me that something very profound, wow, I'm getting really dizzy right now. Like I'm having, whoa, that is weird. Okay, I'm just gonna roll with it. That opposition with Algol in his seventh and first house. I mean, something was discovered. Something shifted. There was a massive change in terms of relationships, the nature of relationship. I think maybe something was discovered, something shifted, something unexpected happened in terms of a relationship. And who knows what relationship it was. I'm not going to say what it was, but this opposition to Lilith in his first house, which is something very, especially Scorpio, especially in the position of the Heyoka, right? It was, David Wilcock is I would read as a sacred empath, a Heyoka. But it's Lilith that is setting that up in his first house, right? It's something so deep and primal that he's not even really, it takes the nature of the relationship to really bring that out. So that in itself, again, it's not surprising to me that that this event happen the way that it did at this time. Let's just put it that way. It really triggered something very deep within his personality, something primal, something maybe he'd been pushing away. In fact, a lot of the astrology that I see in his charts shows that yes, there is ultimately a burden that he has been always meant to carry, and it's part of his work. And not to say that he like being punished or anything. It's more about the service of carrying some sort of burden. And again, whatever that was, that burden was something that that he felt at this time. It seems to me astrologically that he was not able to carry anymore. He did not think he could carry it anymore. He was, I feel like, crushed under the weight of whatever that is, whatever that burden was. And I suspect that something changed, or he realized something, or something was discovered. That was the last straw for him. And I think it's been building over time, and I have intentionally not listened to anything else in terms of content or people's perceptions on purpose, so that we could just look at the astrology and, and break it down on this level. So that's the big thing, is that Venus conjunct Algol, and then coming into this this conjunction. The sun entering his 6th house, which is the house of your works and labors, which in fact is where I see the burden, right? He has a moon in Taurus in his 6th house. His progressed his progressed sun is in his 6th house. His progressed Venus is in his 6th house. But guess where his Chiron is? His natal Chiron in Aries in his 5th house. So he's already gone through his Chiron return, and then Saturn, Mars, Mercury all conjunct right on that 5th house cusp. And 5th house can be joy and laughter and creativity, but it also can be the pure expression of one's sorrow and grief. And sorry about that. I feel like that was, that Mars, Mercury, Saturn, conglomerate that just happened leading up to this point, I think was, again, facing the music, not facing the music, right? Saturn coming into play and just being a really stern, limiting factor, and can be like a weight in the 5th house, right? And I think that's exactly what happened with him. Well, not exactly, but I can see the weight of it on him, and that, again, the only way out, right? Rather than the breakthrough. But he was poised for a breakthrough. That's the thing. And the astrology would have really supported him over this next few weeks had he really been able to push through this particular time period. It's really, really sad. And I've seen it before. And that's, I feel like if you really started to unpack the astrological, charts of people who have also died this way, you'll probably see a lot of similar things, especially with people's progressions. You'll see that things have evolved, and this is all part, these experiences are all part of something bigger. But when you can't see the whole picture, or that picture is distorted, which I think is really what was happening here, then there is no way out, right? And this seems like the only decision that can actually be made that will release a person from their suffering. So what's going to be happening? So right now is a first quarter moon as well, right? Let's actually look at that real quick. We'll move the chart forward to where we are right now and this weekend, because what we're going to see is, first quarter moon, which is always a crisis point, right? And then also we have I'm definitely not a malicious bot, but I do appreciate you. Oh, I have to verify that I'm human. It's like if you let it sit for any amount of time. Okay. Let's see here. So today is the 23rd, and we're going to today's the 23rd, and then we're going to go forward through the weekend. So let me make sure that we are all formatted here. Yes, we are. All right. So you can see also Lilith, speaking of Lilith in Scorpio. So right now, Lilith has been dancing between the 12th house and first house of David Wilcock. So currently it's in the 12th house, in a trine to Jupiter. Let's see here. So by the weekend, Venus will come into Gemini as well. And it's really Uranus coming into Gemini right after that, I think is a major focal point for this weekend. And again, I have felt that could really make or break people in general as well, right? Because the first degree of Gemini is a glass-bottomed boat. Now, just imagine that your own consciousness, your boundaries of your consciousness, right, where you end and everything else begins, is like a pane of glass where you can see everything. You're aware of it all. You're looking through the glass bottom of the boat and having this full experience and visualization of everything, but you're not fully submerged in it. But the only way that can happen is if you have that glass bottom intact, right? And there's something about Uranus that will often pull the fire alarm, break the glass, tip the boat on its side, and then it doesn't really matter, does it? So, but perhaps it's just a matter of perspective, right? That as long as that glass is intact, you aren't going to be completely dissolved into the collective unconscious. And I will also say, speaking of the collective unconscious, David Wilcock had a stellium of Pisces, including his natal sun, and it was in his 4th house, which was a Pisces cusp as well. So, I mean, he really had to work very hard, in my opinion, to not be completely enveloped and sublimated in terms of his own power, right? He really had to work, I think, to make the connection directly to source in order to feel rooted and grounded. And I think that he early on was rooted into something delusional, and that was a fantasy, and not really able to connect to the sacredness of every situation, even at its worst for him. So anyway, that's the Pisces connection to the ocean. So I just feel like that, he kind of pre-waved what may be the case for a lot of people, where that, that thin veneer of separation could easily break with Uranus coming into Gemini like that, or could just flip things around so it seems like that, that you're not really separated from everything else that's going on. So again, this is why I feel like this conversation ultimately is really important, because just because you're on the spiritual path doesn't mean that you're not subject to the instances where your mental health really is challenged, right? And you start, and that your demons, whatever they are, whatever that means to you, they are close, right? They're close. They're whispering in your ear. Maybe there are aspects that are artificially influencing that. Man, the Schumann resonance has been really loud and active for weeks now. And I'm not saying all of that is somehow artificially induced, but just remember that the Schumann resonance is extra low frequency. Our brains are entrained to extra low frequency. It is almost impossible to block that or to mitigate that without some serious mastery. Okay, so we all are having to make it a lifestyle to do that. And every time we go through something intense, this is another opportunity to really settle in and dig deeper into where is our power really sitting, right? Where is our faith really residing, right? And sometimes that faith is tested in the 8th house, right? So it's important that we take it very seriously and take our mental health very seriously and take care of ourselves, and don't push away if we are struggling, right? But don't feed it either, right? It's not as if it's so hard to not identify yourself with those feelings when they are literally taking you over, right? To the point where you want to self-delete. So it's so important to go through those dark nights with with the faith that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And for David, there wasn't, as far as he was concerned. And for other people who have done the same thing, there wasn't, right? They couldn't see it. But that is the result of a long-standing issues that have blocked that out, or that have filtered that, or there's artificial light that is taking its place. And I think that's really, unfortunately, what David's situation may have been, just based on what I'm looking at. Like, gosh, it's like I said, it's such a freaking tragedy. Already it's a tragedy, but the fact that he was poised for such a big breakthrough. And that doesn't mean that he isn't going to be active still as a soul, in this process. If anything, now he's he's free of all of, not to endorse what he did, but he's free of he's free of his mortal coil, and so he's not able to really be influenced in that same way anymore, and so he can be free, and whatever God's plan is for him, that's between the two of them. But we can still learn from his situation. We can still honor everything that he has brought forward, and his impact, right? So just please take care of your mental health. If you know someone is struggling to, and it doesn't hurt just to reach out and just, be like, hey, I'm here and I see you. And that's all it has to be. Some people are really private. Some people really, are crying for help. Some people are just quiet. Like I said, they're just quietly suffering. But I really do feel like this Uranus coming into Gemini period is going to be very, there's going to be a lot of mental upheaval, right, with Uranus coming into Gemini. And I'm not saying that there isn't potential. I just did the reading for the membership last weekend, and it was one of the best we've had in a really long time. So for people who have already maybe, faced their dark night and are clawing their way out, and built some foundations, some platforms to keep from descending that low ever again, it's looking pretty good, right? And that there's a sense of courage and boldness and a willingness to do the work to heal. And that all came out of addressing the South Node conjunct Alpha Draconis, which is really wild, actually. So I think I've talked enough about this situation. I mean, there's more to say. There's always more to say. I'm sure lots of people have lots of opinions. I'm curious to see what the people who knew him best and worked with him for a long time, what they have to say about it. I intentionally didn't listen to anything or look at anything so that I could maintain my own position, and to take care of our mental health as best we can, and to take it seriously, right? And to realize that this path, this spiritual path, is one that is difficult, and there is suffering, and there's a lot of doubt. And part of that doubt is the process. And we can't do anything about what has been done, but we can certainly learn from it and take as much insight and guidance as we can, and to very much honor everything that David has brought forward up to this point, as a professionally and personally. I think his heart was truly in the right place always. I really did, and still do. But I just don't think his head has been there in a really long time, which is a real shame, because he was very bright, and a prolific researcher. I mean, he's a Scorpio rising, prolific researcher, really wanting to get to the bottom of things. And so prayers for his family and the people who are close to him. I'm sure he'll be reaching out to you in his own way at some point in the near future. All right, guys, I hope you got something out of this vibe check. If you need anything, everything you need is in the description box below. I will be putting together the next full moon forecast soon. Please take care of yourself. If you are interested in energy work, it's a great tune-up when you are having whatever issues you're having, can address it and certainly give you an energetic tune-up, patch up some holes energetically. Or if you're interested in a reading, you can find everything in my website. So take care, everyone, and I will talk to you sooner than later. Bye.